Seattle, 1996. Bill Gates walked alone in the rain. No security. No car. No destination. His coat clung to his body, water dripping from his hair, but he didn't feel the cold. That night, he wasn't the founder of Microsoft. Not a billionaire. Not the face of the future. He was just a tired man who no longer knew why he was alive. It felt like the weight of the world was crushing him and he couldn't carry it anymore. One thought kept repeating in his mind: what if I've already done everything I was meant to do? What if there's no point left? He stopped at the center of a bridge over Lake Washington. Looked down. The dark water moved gently beneath him, stirred by the wind. It would be so easy. One step and silence. One step and finally, peace. That's when he heard a voice: "You look worse than I do. And I sleep on the street." Bill turned. A man in his 50s stood just a few feet away, wearing an old, soaked coat. Hair messy, hands in his pockets, but his eyes clear. Calm. "Human, I stood here once too," the man said, walking closer. "After my daughter died. I thought that was it. The end." Bill said nothing. He just looked at him as if this stranger had stepped out of some other world. "I chose to live one more day," the man said. "Just one. No promises. No hope. Just one more day. And that day saved me." Silence. The wind lifted the rain from the railing. Bill looked down again. Then slowly, he looked back up. "You don't have to know why you're alive tomorrow," the man added quietly. "Just decide to stay alive today." They sat together on the cold edge of the bridge. For a long time. No rush. No questions. Just two people. One broken, the other beside him. And somehow, that was enough. The next morning, Bill returned to his office. But he wasn't the same man. He had stood at the edge and stepped back. From then on, he started living differently. Giving. Helping. Listening. Years later, already the richest man on earth, he began searching for that stranger. No name. No address. Just a memory. Just gratitude. And when he found him living in a trailer on the outskirts of the city, tired but still standing, Bill went to him in person. He said, "This home is yours." For that night. And they sat together again. No words. Like before, "Money didn't save me. A man who had nothing did." It began as a quiet ache. Then it became a calling. Years passed. The world applauded him: magazines, awards, standing ovations at global summits. The man who brought computers to the world. The man who promised vaccines, schools, food, light. Bill Gates became a philanthropist, a symbol of progress, the man with a plan for humanity, but beneath the blueprints and billion-dollar grants, one thing never left him. One night. One stranger. One sentence: that he had everything, but he knew, none of it would have existed if not for the man on the bridge. He didn't tell anyone at first. Not Melinda. Not his closest advisors. It was too personal, too raw. It didn't fit on a balance sheet or in a press release. But it was real. And Bill knew what he had to do. He began looking for him the only way he knew how: carefully, methodically, quietly. It started with maps. Then dates. The weather report from that night. Records from shelters around Seattle. He walked into soup kitchens unannounced, sat with volunteers, and asked the same question every time: "I'm looking for someone. He saved my life." Blank stares. Shrugs. A few curious glances. Was he famous? Someone once asked. No, Bill said. But he mattered. Months passed. He wrote letters. Left large anonymous donations to shelters in exchange for old intake logs. Most didn't remember anyone like the man he described: gray in the beard, quiet, carried grief in his eyes. One day, a man at a shelter asked him, "Why is this so important to you?" Bill stared at his hands for a moment, then whispered, "Because when I had everything, I still wanted to die. And he stopped me. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. In a dusty office of a downtown mission center, a young volunteer overheard Bill describing the night. She turned from her desk. "You said he talked about a daughter." Bill nodded. I think I know who you're talking about. He comes around sometimes. Keeps to himself. Never asks for anything." She pulled out a clipboard, flipped through a few pages. "He uses the name Charles. Lives in a trailer park outside Tacoma. Lot 17. Bill didn't speak. He just placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." He drove himself that day. No security. No press. Just a folder in his lap and a question that had lived inside him for years. The trailer park was quiet. A soft wind moved the brittle leaves across gravel. Children played nearby. Dogs barked in the distance. Lot 17 stood at the far end. The trailer was old, but someone had tried to make it home. Potted plants, a wind chime, a small bench under the window. Bill stepped out. His chest felt tight. He hadn't prepared a speech. He hadn't told his team where he was going. He knocked, the door opened slowly. The man was thinner now. Gray hair longer. Wrinkles carved deeper into his skin. But the eyes, those eyes. Bill knew instantly. For a moment, neither said a word. The man squinted into the sunlight, then tilted his head. "You," he said slowly. Bill nodded. His voice caught in his throat. "I've been looking for you." The man smiled faintly, as if he'd been waiting. "You made it." "I did," Bill said. His voice was hoarse. "Because of you." The man stepped outside. They stood, face to face. The breeze moved between them, but neither seemed to notice. "I never caught your name," Bill said. The man hesitated. "Charles. Just Charles." "I'm Bill," he said quietly. "I know." Bill opened the folder and handed Charles a single sheet of paper. It was a deed. A small home, not far from the trailer park. Fully paid. Solar-powered. Quiet street. Enough space for peace. Charles looked down at the paper, then up again. "I can't accept this." "Yes," Bill said gently. "You can. This is for that night." Charles lowered his eyes. His hands trembled. He said nothing. Bill sat down on the step. After a moment, Charles did too. They sat like that in silence. The same way they had all those years ago, with the water below them and the weight of sorrow between them. After a while, Charles spoke. "I wasn't trying to save anyone. I was just talking." "That's why it mattered," Bill said. "You weren't trying to inspire me. You were just telling the truth. And it pulled me back." Charles nodded slowly. "You know what I've learned? When someone's standing on the edge, they don't need a hero. They just need someone to notice." Bill closed his eyes. The breeze felt softer now. "You noticed," he whispered. They sat until the sun began to set. The wind chimes sang quietly behind them. Later that year, during a rare interview, a journalist asked Bill, "What's the most valuable investment you've ever made?" Bill smiled, not the rehearsed smile, but the real one. "The one from the bridge, a house," he said. "For a man named Charles." She raised an eyebrow. "Why him?" Bill looked out the window and said, "Because once, when I had everything, I stood on a bridge, ready to let it all go. And a man who had nothing gave me a reason to stay." And then he said the words that would one day echo across the world: "Money didn't save me. A man who had nothing did." After that night, he was no longer the same. Bill returned to the office the next day. The rain still clung to the pavement, but the fear was gone. His team greeted him as usual: polite smiles, quick updates, questions about the schedule. Everyone assumed it was just another workday. But he spoke less than usual. He looked through people. His office hadn't changed. The same wooden desk, the windows facing the lake, the monitors filled with code. But everything that once gave him purpose now felt hollow as he sat down and opened his laptop. A presentation was waiting the next Windows release. He stared at it. Then closed it. That evening, he left early. No driver. No appointments. Just walking. Nowhere in particular, he simply wanted to be among people. Real people. That he stepped into a small cafe downtown where no one recognized him. Ordered tea. Sat for over an hour. In silence. Around him, people talked about the weather, their kids, local politics. And he listened like someone hearing the world for the first time. At home, he couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, thinking, what if I die, and no one ever knows about him? The man in the coat wouldn't leave his mind. That voice, the one that stopped the scream inside him. The hands buried in pockets, the eyes that had seen pain, and didn't flinch when they saw his. No name. No photo. Just a memory. The next morning, Bill wrote a single sentence on a small piece of paper and tucked it into his wallet. Live one more day. He carried it everywhere from then on, like a compass that didn't point north, but pointed to something truer, and slowly, something inside him began to shift. Not dramatically. Quietly. But deeply. He stopped raising his voice in meetings. He started asking more questions and listening. Really listening. And for the first time, truly seeing people. A few weeks later, he returned to that bridge. Not to stand on the edge, but to look the sky in the eye. He stood for a long time. And there, he made a decision. I have to find him. It began with a map and a memory. Bill sat alone in a dimly lit room in his home, not his office, not the boardroom, not some futuristic lab filled with ideas. Just him, a legal pad, and silence. On the map of Seattle, he drew a small red X where the bridge stood. That was the only thing he knew for certain. The rest was fragments. Gray beard. A long coat. A voice steady, quiet like someone who had already survived the worst. A daughter. Lost. Just one more day. That sentence had become his heartbeat. And now, it was a trail. He began quietly. He didn't want media attention. He didn't want the foundation involved. This wasn't about philanthropy or image. This was personal. He walked into shelters unannounced. Cafes where the homeless sometimes came in to warm their hands. Clinics where social workers had learned to recognize stories behind silence. At one center, he sat across from a volunteer named Eva. She didn't recognize him, not immediately. She simply saw a man who looked tired in the soul. I'm looking for someone, Bill said. He saved me once. He lived on the street, maybe around 1996. He said he lost his daughter. That he came close to ending things, on a bridge. Eva tilted her head. Do you remember his name? Bill shook his head. Only his words. She softened. I've worked here 12 years. I've heard 100 stories like that. But not that one. Not yet. He nodded, stood to leave. She stopped him gently. Why now? Bill looked down. Took a moment. Then said, because I'm finally ready to thank him. He visited 8 shelters in 2 days. Then 12 more the following week. Sometimes he left quietly. Sometimes he'd hear a whisper, I think I remember a guy like that, but the details never fit. Wrong city. Wrong year. Wrong man. At one point, he thought maybe he had imagined it all. Maybe the man was just a voice in his head. A manifestation of hope. But no, the voice had been too real. The warmth in it. The depth. That he walked neighborhoods at night, dressed plainly. Sat on benches. Handed out coffee. Not because he expected to find him, but because he needed to feel close to the place where it happened. And then, something that happened in a small outreach center on the edge of Tacoma. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. He had planned to leave town. But something pulled him there. An older woman named Ruth ran the front desk. She spoke slowly, with the kind of calm that comes from watching storms come and go. Bill asked the same question. showed the same sketch not of a face, but of a coat, a posture, a presence. Ruth stared at the paper. Then at Bill. Then back at the paper. I might know who you're looking for, she said. Goes by Charles. Or used to. Doesn't say much. Just kind. Soft-spoken. Keeps to himself. Lived in a trailer not far from here last I heard. Bill's heart beat louder. But he kept his voice steady. Do you know where? Ruth paused. I don't give out personal addresses, even to, she hesitated, even to people like you. But I can give him a message. If he wants to see you, he'll come. Bill wrote one sentence on the back of the sketch. Folded it. Handed it to her. Just tell him it's from someone who once stood on the same edge. A week passed. Then two. No call. No sign that he almost gave up. But one evening, Ruth called. Charles came by today, she said softly. He read your note. Said, he'd meet you. Bill didn't ask when or where. He simply said, tell me. The next morning, he drove himself. Out past the city, where the roads narrowed and the homes grew quiet, Lot 17. A weathered trailer with faded curtains and a tired wind chimed that he stood there for a long moment before knocking. His hands didn't tremble, not from fear. From reverence. The door opened. Slowly, and there he was. Older. Thinner. More gray. But unmistakably him. Charles looked at him, squinting against the morning light. No recognition in his eyes at first. But then, something shifted. You, he said. Not as a question. As a memory returned. Bill didn't smile. He just nodded. I've been searching for you, he said. Charles stepped outside. No shoes. Just socks. He looked around, as if the world was too loud now. You made it. Bill looked him in the eye. Because of you. Charles looked down. I didn't think I said anything special. You didn't, Bill said. You were just, real. And that's what saved me. They stood in silence. The same kind of silence that had once passed between them on the bridge, and then Charles did something unexpected. He stepped forward and hugged him. Briefly. Gently. It was the kind of embrace that asked nothing but offered everything. They sat on two folding chairs beside the trailer. No press. No security. No record of this moment. Just two men, older now, bound by something few would ever understand. Charles didn't ask for anything. But Bill came with something. A folder. A deed. A home that he didn't hand it over right away. He waited. He listened. Charles spoke softly. After that night, I went back to the bridge. Just to see if it was real. It was. Then he added, I've lived quietly. Not because I had to. But because I didn't know where I was needed anymore. Bill replied, you were needed. That night. More than you'll ever know. Then he placed the folder gently in Charles's lap. This home is yours, he said. For that night. Charles looked down. No words. Just the sound of the wind. The same wind that once passed between them on steel rails above dark water, and in that silence something shifted again. A full circle. A story that wasn't finished, but finally, had a direction. It was a gray afternoon when they returned. Not much had changed. The same rust on the railings. The same cold wind off the lake. Cars moved steadily behind them, people on their way to work, to homes, to lives. No one noticed the two men standing still, side by side. Bill hadn't planned this visit. It just happened that he had offered Charles a ride home after lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and black coffee at a quiet diner. But halfway through the drive, Bill slowed the car. His eyes fixed on the horizon. Charles noticed, this where it happened, he asked. Bill nodded. Yeah. Neither of them said more. Charles looked at the bridge, then at Bill. Let's go, he said. So they did. No words. Just footsteps. They walked to the center, where the metal beams cross above the lake. The same place. The same moment, only years later, and then, silence. Charles leaned forward against the railing, his hands resting gently. He looked down. The water still looks the same, he said. Bill's voice was soft. That night. I was ready. I had written letters. Deleted everything from my computer. I thought I was doing the world a favor by leaving it. Charles didn't respond. Just nodded slowly. I know that thought, he said. I had it too. Bill turned toward him. You said you lost your daughter. Charles closed his eyes. His voice came from somewhere deeper. She was 9. Car accident. Hit by someone who didn't stop. I was late picking her up from school by 10 minutes. That 10 minutes became the rest of my life. Bill didn't move. I lost my wife after that, Charles continued. Not to death. Just, to grief. She couldn't look at me without seeing her. I started drinking. Lost my job. The house. Eventually, I just started walking. I didn't care where. He looked at the sky. That bridge became my confession booth. I would come here at night, talk to the wind. Ask God why. Not for answers, just to be heard. Bill whispered, and then I showed up. Charles smiled faintly. Yeah. I thought you were a ghost at first. Or me from a different time. Bill let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You were calm. Like none of it scared you. I was scared, Charles said. But I'd already lost everything. Sometimes, the ones who look the calmest, are the ones who've already lived through the fire. They both stood in silence again. I've never told anyone this, Bill said, barely audible. But I don't think I ever built Microsoft because I believed in technology. I think I was just, trying to outrun silence. Charles looked over at him, eyes soft. Did it work? Bill shook his head. No. Not until that night. When you said, live one more day, something broke. But not in a bad way. It broke open. And I've been trying to live that day ever since. Charles's voice cracked gently. I didn't think I had anything left to offer. I thought I was invisible. Bill turned to him fully now. You weren't. You were light in a dark place. You didn't preach. You didn't teach. You were just there. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded paper yellowed at the edges. Handed it to Charles. Charles opened it. A single sentence, written in clean, careful print. Live one more day. He smiled. Then teared up. You kept this? Bill nodded. Every day. In my wallet. Through every speech, every boardroom, every award, this was the only thing I knew for sure. Charles folded it again, held it tight. You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't come by that night? Bill didn't flinch, all the time. And that's why I'm here now. Not to repay you. I can't. But to honor you. Because the world thinks I built a company that changed lives. The truth is, my life was changed by a man with no name, no money, and no reason to care, but who did. They stood again in silence, but it was different now. Full. Peaceful. A single bird flew overhead. The lake shimmered. Bill said, you ever wonder why we survive? Charles wiped his eyes, voice low. Maybe so we can help the next person on the edge. Bill looked down at the water, then back at the road. Let's go, he said, but as they turned, Charles paused. He placed the folded paper on the bridge rail. Left it there. Bill raised an eyebrow. For the next one, Charles said. They drove in silence most of the way back. At one red light, Bill asked quietly, do you need anything? Charles smiled. No. I have a bed. I have quiet. And now. I have a reason. Bill nodded. Then, more hesitantly, would you let me tell your story? Charles was quiet for a long time. Then he said, only if you tell it right. Not about who I was. But about what anyone can be, if they just show up. Bill didn't speak. Just reached out and shook his hand. A year later, the world saw a different Bill Gates. That he still wore the same glasses, still spoke softly, still built foundations and funded futures. But something had shifted. His voice carried more weight now, not because of what he said, but because of where it came from. People noticed that IT began with a keynote. Not about artificial intelligence or the future of global health. It was an unannounced talk at a quiet university in Vermont. No slides. No data. Just a chair, a bottle of water, and a story. I want to tell you something I've never said publicly, he began. Students sat still. Reporters froze mid-sentence. There was a night I didn't want to live anymore, he continued. Not because of failure but because of emptiness. When you've built everything and still feel nothing, that's the kind of silence most people don't understand. He paused. His hand rested gently on the folded paper he had taken from his wallet. I stood on a bridge, ready to jump. And a stranger, a man who had nothing, walked up to me and said, "You look worse than I do. And I sleep on the street." Some people in the room smiled. Others covered their mouths. The truth was raw. Heavy. That man's name was Charles. He told me about his daughter. About his own night on the same bridge. He said he chose to live, just one more day. Bill looked up, his eyes quiet but burning, and because of him, I lived one more day too. He unfolded the paper. Held it up. I carried this with me for over 20 years. Through every achievement, every interview, every moment when I forgot what mattered. This reminded me. He set it down. You don't need to be powerful to save a life. You don't need to be famous. You just need to show up. To say something. Anything. Charles didn't know me. He had no reason to stop. But he did. And because of that, the entire course of my life and maybe the world shifted. Then he said what no one expected. I found him. Gave him a home. But he gave me something greater, a second beginning. From that day on, Bill never ended a talk without sharing Charles's story. That IT spread slowly at first. Quiet interviews. A paragraph in a biography. Then a journalist picked it up. A student posted the clip online. A pastor preached it in a Sunday sermon, and then, the world listened. The quote went viral. Not one from his TED Talks. Not one from Microsoft. Just 12 words, money didn't save me. A man who had nothing did. Charles never wanted fame. He never appeared on television. He never moved into a mansion. He stayed in that quiet house Bill gave him, planting tomatoes, fixing old radios, waving to kids on bikes who passed by. He lived simply. But not quietly. Because people began coming. One by one. Not to ask for help. But to say thank you. To say they'd heard the story. That it made them stop. Made them choose one more day. And Charles, he would smile, listen, and always say the same thing: it wasn't me. I was just someone who didn't walk away. When Charles passed away, there was no state funeral. No headlines on every channel. But Bill flew in, quietly, and sat in the back row of a small, wooden chapel. At the end of the service, he stood up. And with a shaking voice, said, he never asked for anything. He never wanted to be remembered. But I will remember him every day for the rest of my life. He stepped down. Walked to the front. And placed something on Charles's casket, a piece of paper, folded neatly. It read, "Thank you. For that one more day." Final words on screen. Sometimes the most important meetings are the ones no one plans. Hope doesn't always come in grand speeches. Sometimes it comes in silence. In kindness. In a stranger on a bridge. You may never know the impact of your presence. But someone else might carry it forever.